I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh!
The fog thinned by the time we had stumbled and generally trudged uphill for several long blocks. In the middle of an open space where two narrow streets crossed, I paused for a moment. Over my shoulder, I could see the mast tips of the Eidolon. Oof! Samuel, head down, ran into my shoulder. Sorry. I turned and took several quick steps to catch up to Tamara and Isolde. Overhead, higher clouds had turned dark gray, and a touch of damp breeze brushed my cheek, then was gone. The mist still dropped a faint gauze curtain over the buildings we passed. Many were deserted, or at least dark. From a handful of windows oozed the light of golden lamps. The acrid tang of wood smoke mixed with the dampness of mist. "Ghost town," muttered Merton from somewhere behind me. "We're the ghosts," responded Isolde. Her voice was so low I doubted that Merton had heard her. I supposed we were outsiders haunting the streets, while inside, the Freetowners huddled around the lamps and fires that held an unseasonably early fall at bay. "Here we are," announced Isolde. I glanced ahead over her shoulder. The building's weather timber walls looked gray, spirit gray in the thinning mist and growing dark, but a golden glow poured from every first-floor window, and the blue shutters were folded back to let light escape, almost as if statement that the structure would not draw into itself against forces of chaos. "Traveler's Rest," proclaimed the sign hanging over the wide double doorway. The doors themselves, their thick brass handles glinting in the light of the two oil lamps that flanked the doorway, were still folded back against the wide timbers of the front wall, almost as if daring the dark to enter. I took a deep breath, feeling some of the tension begin to leave me as I followed Isolde through the doorway. A second set of doors, red oak like the first, although half the thickness, swung open at her touch. Within moments we all stood on an open, polished wood floor, separating a parlor-like area from a wooden counter. Like the doors, the counter was finished and smooth, planed red oak, without the ornamentation except for matching oak cupping covering the corner joints. The wood was protected by a dull varnish that radiated the gold of the lamps on the wall. Right before us was a wide wooden stairway with a brownish carpeted runner covering most of the stairs themselves. To our left opened another archway, through which I could see a series of tables covered in red-checked cloths, with individual chairs drawn up to each table. Behind the counter stood a gray-haired woman with a cheerful smile. She said nothing as Isolde turned and looked us over. "Each of you has a single room. It has been paid for. You may take other arrangements if you wish. We will have dinner together in the small living room, which is behind the one you see on the left. Meet there as soon as you are settled. You can leave your weapons in your rooms. They will be safe there. Now, please check in at the counter." Her words reflected the long practice, and while I was wondering how many groups she had escorted to Freetown, she had already stepped up to the counter. "We didn't think to see you again, Magistra. The unexpected can change everyone's plans," Isolde laughed, an off-tone laugh. "Here's the normal." Clink. The momentarily widened eyes of the woman in the faded green blouse indicated the payment was scarcely normal. "Did you meet the new tax collector?" asked the counter lady. "Ah, yes. We also met the Duke's new and late champion." "Oh dear. I doubt the Duke's enforcers will be here immediately. But I won't be staying after this group leaves tomorrow. Not this time. The new duties are unpopular. The rumor has it that the Hamorian Legate left Freetown rather suddenly. No ships are likely to enter the harbor until some certainty is established." The innkeeper raised her eyebrows slightly as she eyes Isolde. If Hammer is thinking of acting, that's certainly true. No ships are likely to be seen. I didn't frown, but I knew how Isolde was leaving. The only question in my mind was what else she might be doing before she left. Come on, Laris, don't gape. Step up. Isolde had stepped aside without me noticing it. A young Blackstaff. I'll bet the harbor guard didn't like that, especially now. No. I looked at the open ledger, which had a space for each traveler's name, no country. Scrawling down my single name beneath Isolde's, I started to step away. Here's your key, young man. Room 15, second floor at the back. The key hung from a brass square nearly the size of my fist. I took it and headed up the stairs, not looking at anyone, just trying to keep my staff from banging on the staircase railing posts. I followed the upstairs carpeted hallway, also lit by a set of oil lamps, to the back and number 15. 2 doors stood aside by 14 and 15. The key opened my door easily, without so much as a squeak, then swung quietly closed at my touch. Click. The room held a double bed, a low 3-drawer red oak dresser, topped with an oak-framed mirror, a wash basin with a table with towels, and a wardrobe. The braided rag rug covered the wide and polished gold oak planks from next to the bed just before the dresser. The single window was closed, flanked by cheerful red checked curtains tied back with thick white cords. A lamp over the low headboard lighted the room. The bed was covered with a handmade red quilt showing a pattern of geometric red and white snowflakes. After hanging my cloak on the wardrobe, I stripped off my tunic and rummaged through my pack. The water in the basin was warm, and with the small bar of soap, the razor for my pack, the water, and the heavy towel, I did my best to make myself presentable. The mirror showed me as clean-shaven, tanned, reasonably decent-looking, but young. Still too young to be doing what I was going to have to do, beginning in the morning. Picking up the tunic and looking it over, I decided it was still adequate. Slightly grimy, but wearable, and there wasn't either the time or the place to wash it. So I put it back on and used the dampened corner of the towel to remove a few more of the obvious smudges. As I placed the pack in the wardrobe, I had to shake my head. The Traveler's Rest was definitely more than it seemed, the sort of inn that probably only the very well off could afford. The staff just barely fit inside the wardrobe, and only at an angle, but Isolde's words to the contrary. I didn't really want to leave it in plain view. The Lorcan was cool to my fingers, reassuring me that at least I wasn't in the presence of overt chaos, although that was scarcely likely with someone such as Isolde leading us. With a last look around the room, I picked up the key, opened it to the doorway, and stepped out into the hall carpeting and almost into Crystal, who was backing out of her room. "Oh, sorry," I apologized. Clank, my key jangled against hers. We both smiled, more from nervous relief than from humor. "Rather lovely quarters for us outcasts," I observed. "Lovely? I suppose. You don't think so?" For some reason, I didn't want to walk away. "Are you going to change what you are because of lovely quarters?" Her voice was both soft and musical, more relaxed than I had heard it. She had me on that one. I wondered why I would listen to Crystal, and think about what she said, when if Tamara questioned me, I was ready to fight. "What are you thinking, Laris?" "Oh, I didn't really want to tell her. Just that I can listen to you even when you raise questions." "I'll take the flattery." She bestowed a soft smile on me. Clink. Rin stepped from her room into the hallway and looked at us. Are you two gonna talk forever, or can we get the sermon and have some dinner? The blonde looked at us, then bent over and inserted her key into the room lock. I did not follow Rin's example, since I really doubted locking the door made any difference in this particular inn. Shall we go? I suppose we should. She turned and made her way down the hallway toward the stairs, the sword I had given her still at her belt. Samuel, Merton, Dorothy, and Wren were already seated at the rectangular table in the small dining room when we arrived. The place at the head of the table had been left for Isolde. I sat in the vacant chair at the foot of the table. Crystal sat on my left and Merton on my right. My other choice would have been to the right of Isolde's chair. I left that for Tamara. As I pulled out my chair, Isolde, face washed and hair brushed, stepped through the archway from the main dining area, looked up, and nodded at her, receiving the barest inclination of her head in return. She glanced up one side of the table and down the other side, pausing as she stopped at the empty space left for Tamara. Almost as if she had been waiting for the notice, the redhead stepped through the archway. Isolde's eyes flickered back to the rest of us, without really looking at any of us. This is the last place where you can freely mention your origin, began Isolde, her hands resting on the back of the red oak chair at the end of the table. As when we had left the idol inn, she wore black, all black. Tunic, trousers, boots, belt, and neck scarf. With the pale skin, she looked like a soldier, or worse. Once you step outside the walls of this inn, you are subject to loyal customs, thieves, bandits, and soldiers, to mention the most obvious dangers. As a practical matter, the road outside the main gates is generally safe for at least 7 k's into Kandar, except for petty theft and assault, which can happen just about anywhere. Except Recluce, muttered someone behind me. Except Recluce, affirmed Isolde. But for various reasons, you all have found Recluce too confining. Or Recluce has found you in need of the outside world. It is for that reason that you will travel alone. You made your decisions alone, and you must face the consequences alone. At least until you are ready to make your final decisions, but you all know that. First, I promised an update about local conditions. As you discovered earlier, the Duke has decided to use his control over the port to attempt to raise more revenue. Most of the trading nations are avoiding the port, and there will be more unrest in Freetown. Enough that you should probably consider leaving the area quickly. Spidlar and Hayton will have taken over much of the trade, and the routes of the South and West Horns to Senrin. Sligo, north of here, has suffered unseasonable weather, including early snowfalls, and the food is getting scarce. I couldn't help yawning, but I managed to stifle it without being too obvious. Crystal found though. Safe to travel in either Galos or Kyvros, but not from one to the other because of increasing skirmishes along their borders. Finally, she looked around the room. You have had enough lectures. I agreed with that wholeheartedly, and she wouldn't be using that as a lever for yet another one. I was hungry. And I wouldn't be adding to them much. I almost groaned. But there is one last thing to consider. The outside Recluce refer to their world, the rest of the world, as the real world. Kandar will become your real world. If you die here, and some of you may die, you will die permanently. But Recluce is also a real world, in many ways more solid than Kandar. You have to decide which world is real for you. Which reality, with all its rules, whether they are the rules of order, or the mixed and changing rules of order competing with chaos will be yours. She gestured toward the archway through which a serving boy brought a tray heaped with dishes. Here is supper. Afterwards, you may sleep in the room upstairs, or not, as you please. There will be fruit and pastries here in the morning. You may leave when you please. But you will all be out of the inn before sunset tomorrow. Those of you leaving Freetown should not wait until the last minute. Someone is always robbed that way. Given the current mood of the Duke, I would not recommend staying in Freetown. But that is indeed your choice, the first of many. Abruptly she stopped, then pulled out her chair and sat. The plates came down upon the checked cloth, and the innkeeper, appearing from nowhere, briskly set a glass before each of us. Wine or red berry? Wine, answered Tamara. Red berry, wine, red berry, I answered in turn, watching as the liquid nearly filled the heavy tumbler. Then, smiling as Merton speared 3 chunks of steaming meat with a knife and deftly transferred them to his plate. We were all hungry, even Isolde, and little enough was said until later, when Tamara sipped from her tumbler, then asked brightly, "What will happen to the Duke of Freetown?" Isolde looked up from her plate at Tamara. Her face was expressionless, even as she smiled. "Why, whatever will be, will be." "It's not exactly an answer," pressed Tamara. "No, it is true and polite, and I will be happy to discuss the matter with you in much greater depth once you return from your danger geld, assuming you choose to return and do not find Recluce too confining." Isolde returned to cutting a sliver of buffalo from the slice upon her plate. Tamara glared, while the magistra ignored the redhead's impatience. I couldn't help smiling. "You're amused, mouthed Crystal." After wiping my grin from my face, I answered, trying to keep my voice low enough that it would not be heard over the pleasantries being exchanged by Samuel and Dorothy. Tamara has trouble when people don't manipulate easily. Don't we all? I shrugged. Crystal was probably right, but Tamara's whole attitude was to insist she was right and that the world should recognize it. "Good luck to you all," Isolde's quiet tones stilled the small room. "From this point on, you are all on your own. I hope to see you again, but that is your choice." She nodded, then walked out, the heels of her boots echoing faintly on the hardwood floor as she crossed the empty main dining room. Abrupt, typical of the masters. Rather than saying anything, I gulped a mouthful of red berry juice, then waited, looking to see who had stayed and who had left, except that the table quieted, and we all ended up looking at each other. For all of the pleasant surroundings, they still don't really care. Tamara's voice broke the silence. I pulled back my chair. I need some sleep. I would have liked to talk to Crystal, but the thought of me saying anything with Tamara hanging on every word bothered me. "It's early yet," complained Merton. Nodding at the innkeeper, back behind the counter, I took the stairs 2 at a time. I wasn't up to another argument, and staying downstairs would have led to that. Besides, after the next morning, I might never see any of them again, and I was getting tired of Tamara's attitude. Then, it was clear she was tired of mine. The door opened easily, and I stepped inside. The room was just as I had left it, except darker, because the blackness outside was absolute, with nothing, not even a single light showing anywhere where I stepped to the window. The fog and clouds seemed thicker, but how could I really tell? Click, as I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled off my boots, I heard Crystal's door open and close, but no sound of voices. Off came the tunic and trousers, and I reached up and turned off the lamp. With the quilt around me, I was asleep in instants, although I thought I heard a faint knock on my door once, just as I was dropping off. But I was too sleepy to get up and check, especially since it was probably my imagination. Still, I wondered, but I dreamed of neither redhead girls or dark-haired women. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of these videos. See y'all in the next one. Goodbye!